Hello and welcome to Kemet Capital, a community of holders and seekers of African capital. I'm your host, JS, and before we begin with today's capital talk, let's start with our usual PSA, our guiding principle, our word of affirmation is the output function from Cobb and Douglas. We're very thankful for those two guys who have dreamed about this formula that, in my opinion, applies to everything in our lives, even as an individual. The capital can be substituted by the time that you have on this planet, and the L is your work. Whatever you do, if you want to increase the output, whether it's love, professional, even as an athlete, you need to invest your capital, which is the time. As an individual, that's our capital allocation. We only have a certain limited amount of time, but we have maximum amount of labor. So this depends on us. But for this community in Kemet Capital, we worry about economic strength. To make Africa great again, we need to increase our output. So we're going to discuss about the capital aspect of this formula in today's talk. And the subject matter for today is this article, Working Together, we can transform the South African railway network for the better. The article is from Luvuyo Masinda, CEO of Standard Bank Corporate and Investment Banking. Standard Bank, if you guys are not familiar, let's flip this. To flip, guys, is Control Shift Plus. You can flip your PDF around as I'm doing here. So this is Standard Bank. It's the largest lender on the continent. Big guys, big players. So this guy is in investment banking. What is investment banking? I do that because, guys, we need to demystify the financial industry and sector as a whole. So I'll sometimes veer from the main topic to provide context, for newer members and allow myself as well to be educated by more sophisticated members of the community. So as I was saying, investment banking, because reading an article, we always have to be cognizant of who is sponsoring that research. When you see a research saying, oh, uh, cereal is good for breakfast. Make sure that a company selling cereals is sponsoring that research. So same for an article. When you read it, you need to understand the context. Who is writing this article? So this guy is in investment banking. And what they do in investment banking is a specialized branch of banking, and they deal basically with raising capital, merger and acquisition. When I say raising capital, let's say you are a company and you want to expand your operation, for example, you need funds to buy machineries or to invest in research and development. You either need equity or debt. So an investment bank will come in and advise you on the best way to raise capital and also connect you with holders of capital. So people who are really ready to invest. So they're the middle guy. So this is uh, Vuyo Masinda. He's the CEO. Actually, guys, I wanted to show you. I was curious to know a little bit the volume of the investment banking division in this company for Standard Bank. Just out of curiosity to know if Luvuyo is a performing guy. Let's see if we have it somewhere. Personal home services, lending, no, software, investment assets, okay. Increase a higher margin. It's just me being nosy, guys. I want to make sure Luvuyo is performing well. Investment banking, oh, that's 50%. What? Change. Oh, it appears as this guy is working. Anyway, guys, let's back to the article. Global consensus does exist, in one way at least. For a greener and more prosperous future for us all, rail transport must serve as the backbone of our transportation systems. In South Africa, the pressing question is How do we achieve this? According to the African Development Bank Group, rail transport, due to its energy efficiency, reduced greenhouse gas emissions, and lower cost per ton kilometers, is expected to play a pivotal role in the conveyance of freight over long distances. Okay, we're gonna stop here, guys, because personally, my preference in infrastructure, in terms of transportation infrastructure, is the railroads instead of roads. Because as you guys know, in this community, we're looking also for ways to be sustainable, to acquire and to to um, to acquire and to exploit our capital in a sustainable way for us to be dominant for the next 1,000 years. So I'm a very big proponent of rail because on average, even though on average roads are cheaper per kilometer than railways, there are other, benefits for society. As well, if you're talking about high speed rail, they might cost maybe, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 times more than per kilometer due to the infrastructure like the tracks, the power, signaling. High speed rail, it's a different beast. But in terms of maintenance costs, roads, they need frequent resurfacing. Meanwhile, railways have higher upfront costs but lower maintenance over time. And also, when we talk about sustainable mode of transportation, rail is 9 times more efficient than passenger car, and like 3 to 6 times more efficient than trucks for freight. So rails is a is a critical infrastructure for any developing or nation and or even developed nations. You need rail transportation. It's more efficient and it's cost effective, right? So let's continue with the article saying investment in rail offers the dual benefits of economic development and climate impact mitigation. As we have seen in recently concluded climate talks, the two things can rarely be separated to ensure a sustainable and just transition. Through the course of the past 5 years, South Africa has been on an exciting economic renewal journey. Government policy initiatives such as Operation Vulindlela, the National Logistics Crisis Center (NLCC), and the Forward-Thinking Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program (REP) have undoubtedly accelerated progress and added substantial momentum to match the government's ambition. And yet, to unlock more of its economic potential, revi- revitalization, and sustainability aims, the country will need substantial strategic investment in infrastructure. Okay? You need strategic investment in infrastructure, and this goes for all countries on the continent. We need strategic investment in infrastructure. So, because of that, I wanted to share with you guys a little bit what that looks like. What's the timeline, of project financing. So, this is this diagram here. Let me just pull maybe this. We're gonna use circles. So, this is the pre-feasibility study. Oh my God, I always miss this guy. Excuse me, guys. Yeah, circle. Yeah, here. So here we have the pre-feasibility study. You know, you are basically this is the ideation level. The concepts are being designed. You do a pre-feasibility study, and you sign a document called the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU. So the MOU, for those of you who are a little bit familiar, it's a it's a how can I say, it's a little bit like a letter of interest, you know. It's not a letter of commitment. It's not a commitment letter. You're not committed to the program yet or to the project yet, but you're interested, It's a memorandum of understanding. You understand that, okay, if this project goes through, I might be interested. This is from the financing side. So the bank will say that you as the developer or the project owner will sign a memorandum of understanding with the bank. So this is this stage here, the very beginning. So now you move on to like the feasibility study. So the feasibility studies starts with, yeah, negotiation of contracts and the financial clause. So among those contracts, you have this one here, the PPA, and the PPA stands for Power Purchase Agreement. So this is more for like hydro plant or solar plant producing electricity energy. So PPA is a long-term contract between an electricity producer, a seller, and a buyer, usually like a government or a governmental company. So for sale of electricity at an agreed price. So in the PPA, you agreed on the sale price, and they are widely used because you know, you can secure your financing knowing that you have stability in your revenues, and also for the end users, you know that you're going to purchase the energy at a certain price. So it's good for everybody. Everybody is able to kind of, you know, decide what they want to do and plan accordingly. And the other contract here is the EPC. EPC stands for engineering. You have the technical drawings, the specification of the of the infrastructure that you're trying to build. The P in the EPC stands for procurement. So who is going to provide the steel, who is going to supply the concrete, the machinery, hiring of contractor, and so forth. So this is in the P, and the C is construction. So construction, you can imagine, so foundation, installing the equipment, system, and the testing at the end. So this is the EPC. And the OM, it's operations and maintenance contract. So who is going to operate and maintain the infrastructure after it's completed. So during this section, during this stage as well, you might have some equity. So all the funds, most of the funds that you spend here in the pre-feasibility study are sunk costs. So they are not usually included in the equity, but some of those that you do here, like the feasibility study, acquire land, will be included in the construction budget. So this is the feasibility study. So after you do that, now you sign the commitment letter, you secure the financing, loan and equity are available for drawdown. And now you go to the construction phase, construction until the end of the project. The COD, excuse me, the COD is the completion and operational date. So at that date, project is completed, and here you've already done all the tests that you need to do to make sure that the asset is operating well. Construction, COD. So this is basically the life cycle of project financing. We move on back to the article. Last year, the government highlighted the need to raise 1.6 trillion rand in public sector infrastructure investment and a further 3.2 trillion from the private sector to meet targets set out in the seminal National Development Plan by 2030. So this guy is, as I said, is an investment banker. So he's a middleman. So there's a need for capital. He's looking for people to deploy that capital. So this article is a little bit of like a sales pitch. You have to read it through that lens. So that's why I wanted to emphasize at the beginning exactly what is the role, what is this guy doing as for a living, for us to read this article in order for us to understand his point of view, the message that he's trying to put out there, you know, or the actual target audience of this article. So it's for people, you know, who have 1.6 trillion to invest in public infrastructure. So it's going to give you the details of what the program looks like in the country. So it's a sales pitch, which is interesting because I wanted to talk a little bit about infrastructure. So we continue. The Ministry of Transport highlighted the need for substantial investments in rail infrastructure, estimated between 100 billion and 120 billion for Transnet. Additionally, a further 120 billion for the Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa. That's a big amount. So the rand, it's about 5% of a dollar. So you divide that by five, you have the amount in dollars. So this is 6 billion. What am I saying? Yeah. Yes, 6 billion. The passenger rails in South Africa to restore full functionality following the COVID-19 pandemic. These investments are critical to ensure and improve efficiency of the rail network and to support key sectors such as mining, logistics, and are pivotal for the country's economic recovery. While it is common knowledge that South Africa rail network has faced economic pressures that followed cannot be underestimated in this regard. But similar challenges were experienced in other parts of the world. However, amid these challenges, it's important to recognize the immense opportunities that exist. Strategic partnerships with public sector and can unlock significant value for both passenger and freight rail. That's a lot to dissect, guys. We're going to stop here a little bit and talk about project financing. So how are those projects financed? So this is a simplified diagram that I found here. So you have the lenders here. So those are the providers of capital. It's lender, but you can have equity as well in here. Okay, let me just maybe take circle. So the lender agreed to a construction loan, right, for the project, for the power plant, for the rail that you're trying to build. So the lender gives you money every time that you have an invoice here from the construction contractor. It's not like when you have a construction loan, let's say of 100 billion, they give you the 100 billion upfront. No, the draws are progressive. So you do the construction contractor will do the work. You have a contract. He does the work. He sends you invoices. You give him the money for the invoices. You get the money from where? From the lender. So for each payment here, you need to prove the lender that the work was actually completed for the amount that you're asking. The lender gives you money, you pay the construction contractor. So this in this ecosystem, guys, you have a lot of paperwork. So you have a lot of company that are involved for this simple project because you have a cost consultant that will make sure that the invoice from the contractor, the construction contractor, are actually legit. He'll go on site, make sure that the work that you're billing me for was actually done. So there's this company that will be managing this side here. Oh, actually, maybe not. Let me just move. So you have a cost consultant that ensures that the money that you ask is the money that you get by verifying the invoices. You send that to the project. This guy sends also to the lender who will do their own verification. So just to highlight the fact that this ecosystem, this infrastructure requires a lot of professionals, right? So you have the risk mitigation providers, those are insurance company. So the loan might be insured and you have to pay like a premium for the insurance. And on this side also, even the output purchaser usually have to provide insurance that they will actually pay at the agreed upon price. So you have a risk mitigation here as well. And those guys usually it's the risk mitigation is done by the government on this side here. So you see guys, this entire ecosystem for just the financing of an infrastructure project, it's huge. It's a lot of people, a lot of lawyers, a lot of people involved. Let's go back to the article because the article now talks about the public-private partnerships, the PPPs, offer a tangible opportunity to bridge the existing funding gap. Working together, etc. The National Treasury published amendments to the National Treasury Regulations (NTR) 16 last year, and key elements of municipal public-private partnerships legislation to bring it in line with recommendation based on a complete review of the PP framework. So they're trying to review the entire PPP framework. Okay, that's interesting. This evolution in conjunction with the granting of access to third-party private operators to the core rail network in South Africa is essential for driving further development and funding. Exactly. So this guy is calling the private sector to invest basically in the rail. So the legislation is doing everything to make the process seamless, which, in my opinion, every African country should do. But then again, how are we comfortable with those PPPs? Are they really friends or are they foes? You know, because oh my God, what's that? Oh, let's go back to the circles. You know, the PPPs. Because yeah, you need people to finance your project. But then, if you move back here to the life cycle of the project, if you have a PPC, so a PPP, for example, so let's actually track back a little bit. So when you have a PPP, uh, public-private partnership. So usually those guys, there are two type of contract that you sign. You have a design, build, own, and operate. So the PPP will design, you build the infrastructure, you own the infrastructure, and you will operate the infrastructure for the entire life of the infrastructure. And you have a design, build, operate, own, and transfer. So you build, you operate, you own, and you transfer at the end. So there's a concession period, and the concession period is usually in line with the amortization of the debt. Because if we go back to the financing here, to the diagram, you have two type of lenders. So you have, let me just hold on here. So because you have two type of investors. You have investors that come here at the beginning, before construction. Those are brownfield investors. And you have investors that come here at the end when the construction is done. Those are greenfield. And of course, those two, they'll ask different return for their capital because these guys here, the brownfield, because they assume most of the construction risk. You have the risk that the project doesn't go through. So they'll require a higher cost for the capital. So the interest rate of the debt here is usually higher than the greenfield because the greenfield, you come in, the project is already cash flowing, so the risk is limited for you. Now, when we talk about the PPPs, those guys, they are more expensive in general, you know? PPPs, the financing cost is higher because they're private. Private guys, they're private. For them is to make profit. They're not there for charity. So if you have either of those here and there, your project is going to cost higher. It's gonna be more expensive. But you don't have to. Some countries they don't have any choice because those infrastructure project are cost intensive. You need capital, you need investment, you need money. So whatever money you find, you use it. Whether it's an expensive money because those countries they can borrow money, at a cheaper price. But you know how our fiscal policies are, how our credit ratings are in general in Africa, borrowing countries like South Africa, Morocco, and maybe Ethiopia, the big guys in Africa. But most of us, our cost of funds is like the 20%, maybe not 20, but like high tens for sure. So when you have a PPP, which is a private company coming in to make money with you guys, supposedly, allegedly, I should say, they have a higher financing cost. And another aspect that we need to consider is the fact that the interest of the private and the public might not always be aligned. Let's say you're a PPP, you have a power plant, you want to increase, I don't know, the cost of your output, knowing that maybe your cost of fund, maybe your debt was refinanced, now you need to pay a higher interest. You're gonna tell the population, hey guys, pay more in electricity. So, the alignment between the PPP and the public might not always be there. And I was saying that those guys, they charge a lot for their capital. It's because they assume a higher risk as well. If you're a private company, doing business in Africa is very risky. We have to be honest. You have a regulatory risk, you have political risk, and it's a long-term commitment that you're doing. Those projects usually is 10 to 15 to 20 years, and I'm being generous. So they have they assume a higher risk as well. Dealing with African countries, you might have a coup, you might have, you know how it goes. So for them to charge more for their capital kind of makes sense, even though, as I was saying, the interest might not always be aligned between what they want to do and what the population, the end user of the infrastructure, is looking for. So the article continues this evolution in conjunction with the granting of access for third-party private sectors, for third-party private operators to the core rail network in South Africa is essential for driving further development and funding. With extensive experience collaborating with governments and public sector representatives across the Southern Africa and other continental regions, we know firsthand the potential for success through strategic financing initiatives and joint ventures. It is time to act decisively and capitalize on these opportunities. If the notion seems far-fetched, consider that most recently, the United States announced a 600 million investment in new financing for a multi-country railway in Angola, and China made a similar commitment of 1 billion USD in investment in railway infrastructure that spans Tanzania and Zambia. These examples illustrate the undeniable case for rail, the case that South Africa cannot overlook. This investment banking guy is doing his job. He's telling the holders of a capital that, guys, look, the United States is investing in this asset and in this continent. China is investing in this asset in this continent. So come with me as well. Those big guys, they're out there. The opportunity is there. You're just missing out if you're not joining. So brilliant for them. Brilliant for Standard Bank and for Luvoyo. But wow, I'm shocked that this project. Actually, I heard about this project in Angola. It goes from Congo, of course, geological scandal, all the minerals that they have, to Angola. So those lines is probably for minerals. Or those two superpower. I don't want to say superpowers because we as African, we are the superpower of the next 1,000 years. So China and the US, they're investing in rail, and the investment banking guy is telling you that you should do the same, basically. That span that spans Tanzania and Zambia. These examples illustrate the undeniable case for rail in South Africa. Da, da, da. South Africa has run some of the most successful PPPs with Alstom, ex-Bombardier Transportation South Africa, having been part of the original GO Train PPP, bringing investments and global expertise. Alstom, with being a provider of the full GO Train's rail system, including the rolling stock and signaling, and having maintained the entire GO Train. So they had an O&M, so they probably had the EPC, engineering, procurement, and construction. They have an O&M. They have an O&M agreement. That's what the guy is telling us here, including rolling stocks and signaling, and having maintained the entire GO Train rail system throughout the concession period. So basically, so this PPP was design, build, operate, own, operate, and transfer. So at the end of the concession, they will transfer back to maybe the country that the asset is located in with high levels of reliability and availability has contributed significantly to its operational success. This capability can be leveraged and expand the rail network in South Africa, bringing great efficiencies to the economy. Alstom's presence across Southern Africa includes impactful collaborations that have created jobs and added the efforts to revitalize the rail industry and expand inclusion in the economies they operate in. That's the thing with PPPs. They charge a lot for the cost of their capital. They might, own like critical infrastructure in one of your countries, but they create jobs. So that's an economic aspect that we cannot neglect in our journey to accumulate capital. You know, those jobs. So those guys, those concessions, they're usually for let's say 100 years max. We have to have longer visions than that. 100 years is only 10% of 1,000. We need to have 1,000 years viewpoint, objective or time horizon. Our time horizon has to be 1,000 years. So if we can give this concession to those guys for 50 to 100 years, let's do it. Because in the meantime, we're gonna have we're gonna, improve the skills of our workforce, of our labor force, and we create jobs. We have the infrastructure to move our people and goods. So there's benefit on both sides. They get their money for 50 years, they pay the debt, they collect the return on capital, we move on. Advance the bespoke funding of numerous strategic projects. Ours is a partnership that has tangible output. There you go, the salesman is telling you. Ours, ours is a partnership that has tangible output. It's all about the output, guys. As I was saying, our core community value, hub capital, hub the production function, labor and capital for the output. We believe that by aligning strategic priorities of the private sector with those set out by the government, and by nurturing a conducive investment environment through targeted policy in rail, South Africa's broader infrastructure ecosystem can become the bedrock for a sustainable, broad, and inclusive economy that touches the citizenry at both a personal and freight level. I agree. I love trains, guys. Very efficient, very sustainable. Some trains actually, not some trains, the electric train is basically net zero if you're using electricity as a power source. So love the train rail infrastructure compared to roads. We shouldn't make mistakes like they've done in North America where they just add lanes and lanes and lanes. We should be focusing on mass transportation. That means train, that means rails, transportation, and sustainable. For me, it's the rail. Road, highways, it looks good when you see those interchanges, interchanges from the top. It looks good. But animals cannot travel freely. Biodiversity is impacted. Roads, actually, guys, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. Even though I'm not a fan of PPP or foreigners owning piece of our critical, infrastructure, it's the price to pay, in my opinion. So we conclude the article in conclusion, the path to unlocking South Africa's economic potential and achieving vital sustainability goals is clear. By prioritizing substantial investment in rail infrastructure and embracing innovative funding models, such as public-private partnerships, the nation can lay the groundwork for a stronger, more equitable future. The time to act is now. The opportunities are ripe for the taking. We are clear-eyed and realistic about the nature of the challenges before the country, but we remain unrelentingly optimistic about what can be done when a collaborative effort is advanced. Working together, we can continue to grow this country and continent that we collectively call home. Man, Luvuyo. I know, right, guys? I want to invest in real. Reading this article. Yeah, great sales pitch from Luvuyo. Luvuyo Masinda. All right, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comment. PPPs, friends or foe. Peace. See you on the next one. Bye bye.